Now, you wouldn't think it in 2024, but wheelchair access is still a big issue in this country. When it should be there, it so often isn't. And the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, has told Good Morning Britain, quote, everyone has the right to travel with dignity and more needs to be done, in response to TV presenter Sophie Morgan's tireless campaign for better air travel accessibility.
It follows a Civil Aviation Authority report which Sophie says was overly optimistic about the experience of disabled passengers. Now, they found no airports in the UK were quote-unquote poor for their accessibility, but they still say there is more work to be done. Now, before Sophie heads off to Paris to present coverage for the Paralympic Games, she joined us here in the studio. Good morning. Good morning. So there's still a lot more work to be done. There's still a lot of things that, I guess because we've got legislation, we think now everything's hunky-dory. What did you actually find to be the reality?
So the reality is that the Equalities Act, as it's known, doesn't apply in the air. So that's why it's absolutely permissible to have our devices forcibly removed from us when we arrive at the aircraft door, and a whole host of problems then kind of arise as a result of our devices being taken away. So
when you say devices, you mean your wheelchair?
Yeah. So when you get to an aeroplane, the way that you then get onto, if you're someone like me who can't walk, the way you get onto the aeroplane is you're put onto a small chair that's
very
designed
narrow.
To fit. You know, yeah.
Very narrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it goes down the middle of the aisle. It's very narrow, obviously, to fit down the aisle, and then you have to transfer across that into the chair. But because of the way the aircraft's designed, you can't use your wheelchair on board, so your wheelchair has to sit in the hold. And as a result of that, a lot of problems happen. So you'll see on the screen, that's me getting onto what is called an aisle chair.
Right.
And that aisle chair takes you to your seat. Now,
how do you go to the loo?
That's the thing, you can't. So the way that, at the moment, that an aircraft is designed is that people like me are very, very limited in how we can mobilise. So I recently made a documentary for Channel 4. It's called Sophie Morgan's Fight to Fly, and we uncovered some of the problems that come around because of this sort of ableism in the airline industry. And yeah, so if you can't walk, then you have to depend on these small aisle chairs, as they're known, but they're not always on every aircraft, unfortunately. So what I've created is a campaign called Rights on Flights. And one of the things that we're asking for is to improve the legislation that currently doesn't really protect us in the air.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, so it's called, we've created this legislation called the Assisted Air Travel Act, which we're hoping the new UK government will actually adopt. And it sort of sets out a roadmap, a kind of plan for trying to improve things so that we just don't constantly suffer the consequences.
It's not just the technical issues that you just described, and we saw there on the clip. I mean, it's basic stuff like people in wheelchairs are taken to a plane and they're just left on the tarmac.
Yeah.
And the plane closes up the doors and taxis off without them.
So often, yeah, because of the system, when we get to the aircraft door, as you say, this is where things kind of fall apart somewhat. Although problems can start from the very beginning. I mean, in our documentary, you'll see there's people that were denied boarding because their wheelchairs were too big for the aircraft, or there's a whole heap of problems, which I'd love people to go and watch the documentary to sort of become more aware. But yes, as you say, when the process is that we get to the aircraft door, our wheelchairs are taken away, and then the chairs are either taken by the ground handlers and then we're loaded on, and that's where things go wrong. So chairs get broken, lost, damaged, people get hurt in the process. So
it's as if so often you kind of come second in considerations.
I don't think it's worse than that. I don't think you're considered at all, are you? And even when you talk about the wheelchairs getting broken, I didn't realise how expensive they are and how long it takes to fix them. So you get to where you're going and you've got a broken wheelchair. Yeah. What then?
Yeah, so last year my wheelchair was broken 3 times throughout the year. I mean, and I'm not alone. It happens on a daily basis. So I keep using the language deliberately. I'm calling it a crisis. And this is why we need the Transport Secretary to respond in a way that actually reflects that crisis. We need much, much more robust legislation. We need a response that allows us to feel more protected, because at the moment what we're seeing is more and more disabled people saying, you know what, I've seen enough bad news stories, I'm not going to fly. So we're going to get left behind. So what we are asking for is a collaboration with Rights on Flights so that we can work together to try and improve standards, and really just a kind of... We need the Civil Aviation Authority to be able to enforce so when things go wrong for us, OK?
Right.
So, like you said, we get left behind or our wheelchairs get broken. At the moment, the measures in place aren't strong enough. They're not punitive enough. So it keeps happening. Now, if non-disabled people's legs were being broken at the rate that wheelchair users. There'd be outcry. I mean, if I told you that there was a chance that your legs would get broken if you flew, you wouldn't fly, and that's fair enough.
Yeah, exactly.
So what we're asking is the government to reflect that. This has been normalised because we often do normalise the way that disabled people get treated, and it's discrimination, but we sort of say, well, that's just the way things go. Airlines are designed that way.
What I was about to say was that, I mean, I'm not going to say which branch it was, which company it was, but I was at a supermarket in London recently where there should have been a ramp because there was quite a high ledge. There should have been a ramp, and there usually is a ramp.
Yeah.
But on this particular day, there wasn't, and there was a person in a wheelchair saying, where's the ramp?
Yeah.
And the person in charge said, oh, well, it's been taken away for cleaning.
Yeah.
I think, well, then don't you have a spare that you can put it? So I see. So when it's cleaning day, you can't shop in the supermarket.
You know what? I think it's something that I find frustrating because so many of us know this is the reality.
Yeah.
The problem is our laws need to be enforced, and that's complicated. But, you know, at the end of the day, this is something that I think disabled people are tired of talking about. We really need...
You need action.
And not enough more words.
I think you've done some brilliant work.
Thank you so
much. Brilliant work. Really.
Well, it's great to talk to you here, and you speak with such passion, and you're so... I mean, it's unarguable. There shouldn't be a case to make, to be honest with you. But thanks very much for coming.
Thank you for having me on.